For our first project today, I'm starting with these canisters that I picked up on Whatnot, and I recently shared them in a thrift haul, so I'll be sure to link that down below if you want to see all my treasures. One thing I love most about them is that they nest right inside of each other. I don't know why, but I've always found that so satisfying, and I knew that they had so much potential. So to get started, I grabbed my finger sander and did my best to rough up the surface. My outdoor outlet hadn't been working for a while, but thankfully my husband replaced it. So now I'm able to take out my sander and just get some work done that I can't really do inside. And looking back, I probably would have spent a little more time sanding these, but sometimes you don't realize that until later. At least I don't. Once they were prepped, I gave everything a nice coat of apple barrel, burnt umber, and I wasn't worried about full coverage here because this layer is really just creating some depth underneath. And then I let that dry. Now I'm going to give it a coat of Sweet Pickins Extra Bond. I'm going to let it sit for a few hours. Of course, I did lids too. And this step is what helps create all that gorgeous crackle later on. If you've been around the crafting community for a while, you may have heard this called the Connie method, and that's by the painted photographer. Boy, say that 3 times fast. Now I have my Sweet Pickins Sweet Jane and Creamy milk paint, and I mix them equal parts powder and water, and I let it sit about 10 minutes before applying it. I tend to mix my milk paint on the thicker side than a lot of people do, so I really pack my spoon when measuring the powder and mix it really well. Milk paint dries fairly quickly, but I do like to speed things up a little bit with my embossing gun. Then I'll let it sit in the fresh air to finish the job naturally. And either way, you'll end up with lots of beautiful crackle. I've learned that if I use too much heat, the paint can really start flaking off more than I want. So I just try not to overdo it. And you want to make sure that you put your water in first and then your powder. That's why you saw me switch cups. And by the time I'm ready for my second coat, you can already see all that lovely crackle texture starting to appear. Honestly, if you want a lighter crackle effect, you could actually just stop after the first coat. And I just love all the extra depth and character that the second gives. But honestly, like this is like a really good crackle right here. And I'll apply the second coat all over everything and then again let it dry. Now I got my finger sander back out. This is honestly one of my favorite parts because it's where all that character really starts to come through. I sanded the entire surface, smoothing down any of those little peaks while keeping all that wonderful texture. And I just love watching all those little chips flying all around. They make me so happy. I paid extra attention around the handles because if these were truly old canisters, years of hand touching would naturally wear that paint away. The oils from our hands would gradually break down the finish. So adding a little extra distressing there helps create that illusion of age and use. And then once I'm happy with the finish, it's time for the transfers. I'm using Clementine transfer from IOD's 2025 winter release. Honestly, I don't think this transfer feels wintry at all. To me, it's beautiful year round. The pomegranates, the cabbages, the clementines, and the berries have such a timeless old world feel. And these are the ones that we're going to use. So I'm going to start with my pomegranate on the larger canister. Using my transfer stick, I applied the design using a combination of the wave method and also lifting that transfer sheet as I worked. And then once everything was transferred, I burnished it down one final time using my transfer sheet, which is also called a transfer vellum. I struggle a little bit putting this transfer on. I'm going to seal it in with Paint Couture's Extreme Guard satin, but I'm also going to go over all of my canisters with that because I'm going to go in with more transfers for the others, and I just want them to transfer over with ease. And I also like to do this before aging, and it's just like a little insurance policy. If I make a mistake with my waxes or my inks later, it's just so much easier to correct. And we are going to go in with some ink. So now I'm applying my cabbage next, and then my clementines, and then my berries. Now I have my vintage script stamp, and I'm also going to use handwritten notes later on down the road in another project. I'm using, and these are by Redesign if I didn't say so, and my Stone Gray ink by IOD, lightly pressing, not necessarily re-inking my stamp, but just going over the bottom and then adding a little bit to the top. Then I flip my canisters over, and I'm going to use my Metal Lark stamp from IOD. I think it was from the 2026 spring release. Correct me if I'm wrong, in that same Stone Gray ink, I'm going to stamp each canister, but doing it a little bit differently. So I'll be stamping different sections or inking up different sections of my stamp and then placing them onto my canisters. Off camera, I did heat set it, but I'm still very careful about adding way too much heat, especially with milk paint. And I know I sealed it in, but I am very cautious. And then I'm going to seal in my ink with more Extreme Guard. You don't necessarily have to do this step because I see a lot of creators skip it. It's just something I like to do, and it does not obscure those cracks. You'll see that later on. Milk paint is just one of those things that works so differently, and it craves moisture. Like, it will just absorb it like you never even put it there. And that's important. Like, you want to make sure that you seal it in good. If you don't, you're going to reactivate that milk paint and ruin your project. And we certainly don't want to do that, do we? Now that it's dry, I'm going to age it up with some Sweet Pickins dark oil wax. And this is also a sealer. So as I said, you could just use this and be okay. My favorite vintage antiquing paste. I discovered this after watching Marla from Rust to Roses Vintage. She uses it and she absolutely loves it, and now I'm hooked. If you don't know Marla, please go check her out. She is amazing. She's just so talented. I know you'll love this vintage antiquing paste, and I promise you'll love Marla too. I spend quite a bit of time buffing and layering until, everything just feels right. All I'm using is a paper towel, and I spend a lot of time on this step. I really do. If I'm going to have it look, really old, I want it to look as natural as possible. I'm wearing gloves, and this is just a reminder, as you go, distressing and buffing, check for fingerprints or, the marks your gloves leave, because that will stay behind. You want to make sure that you buff that out. And look at these. Aren't they so beautiful? I just love them. I really do. And you'll have to let me know what you think. Do you think they feel Christmassy? Do you think that transfer book feels Christmassy? Because I personally don't, and I think these just feel so timeless. The fruit side is just so rich and colorful, while the stamped bird side just feels soft and neutral. And I love how you could change the orientation based on the season or, however you're decorating your home. I do think I'll eventually add some food safe inserts because I'd love to use these for flour, sugar, or other baking supplies, but I'd love to know which side is your favorite. For our second project, I'm giving this bread box that I got from Whatnot a complete makeover. First thing I did was remove all the hardware and give it a really thorough cleaning because honestly, this thing needed it. It was disgusting. And I'm going to scrub it up, let it dry really good, and I'm going to give it a light sanding off camera and then go over the whole thing. We're going to do the Connie method again because guess what? We're going in with more crackle. For the paint color, I chose Butter by Sweet Pickins. Just like before, I'm going to mix it equal parts powder and water, and I also added more of the color Creamy. I just love how that just gives you, it stretches your paint a little more. It doesn't change your color, but it gives you a lot more to work with. And so I had already applied one coat and became annoyed because my grate was in the way and I really needed to move that out of the way. And can we talk about the staple remover for a second? Oh my gosh, I don't know why I waited so long to buy it, but it's amazing. And so here I'm applying my second coat, so much easier without the grate in the way. And I'll paint the bread box itself, its second coat too. I just didn't want you to sit here and watch me paint everything. To me, that's boring. I am leaving the inside raw wood as well as the inside of the door. And I just thought, that just kind of balances out things a little bit. I love the idea of peeking through the grate and seeing that natural wood peeking through. Now I have this beautiful fiber paper from Redesign's spring release, 2026 spring release. I used my Cricut tool and my fingers to like feather the edges because I wanted the paper to blend seamlessly into my project rather than looking like it was just sitting on top. This takes a lot of time, guys, because this fiber paper is really strong. It's nothing like other papers. So, you water it down, give it a little bit, and just let it soften. It really doesn't even soften either. Like it's a labor of love. I mean, it takes me about 20 minutes to do this. I did tear my fiber paper pretty bad, but that's okay. We're decoupaging, so like I feel like you have a little leeway there with messing up. And I'm using a generous amount of Mod Podge, and I'm going to carefully position my paper and just make sure it's nice and even and smooth it right out into place. And I'm going to add quite a bit of Mod Podge. I want to be able to, clean this easily down the road, not worry about any dirt or dust getting caught up in that paper. And then once it's all dried, it's going to look like it's melted right into that paint, like it's always been there. And I haven't decided if I'm going to keep this bread box or sell it on Whatnot. You'll have to let me know what you think. I have this beautiful IOD Saint Germain transfer book. I think the soft yellows and the pale pinks coordinate beautifully with that fiber paper. So I'm going to choose a few designs and add them to each side and have them creep up to the top, and then I'll just add another small transfer to the top. So I'm going to go kind of fast on this so you're not just sitting here watching me rub on all these transfers. And I have to say, I'm really glad that I'm finally putting some of these transfers and papers to use. I have a terrible habit of saving things for, that special project, and then I never use them. Lately, I've really been trying to actually enjoy the supplies I buy rather than just hoarding them forever. And I've been sharing them with some friends and some loyal subscribers just so that they can try some of the things that they can't necessarily, get. So I feel like that's a nice way to give back to the people that are here supporting me and encouraging me. I'm currently working hard towards my next goal of 5,000 subscribers. I will be having a giveaway, and that giveaway will have a bunch of like castings and transfers and inlays and just things that I know other people would enjoy crafting with. Basic things from my stash. I just haven't put it all together, but I do know that I will be doing that at my 5,000 mark. So be sure to subscribe and come along for the journey. I'd love to have you be a part of it. So now that it's dry, I'm going to sand the rest of my paper off the sides. It's given me a little bit of trouble there. And for my grate, I took what am I talking about? The color Black Pearl, it is a Luxe Metallic by Paint Couture, and I'm stapling my grate back on now that everything is dry. And this time I applied my dark oil wax with a sponge rather than a brush. I found this gives me much better control and waste less product. And then after I get it all over, and I make sure not to get it over my fiber paper. I was just a little worried about muddying it up. I know I have it sealed, but still I want to be cautious. And I let it sit for about 10 minutes and wipe it back with my Viva paper towels. These things are amazing. And again, going in with my vintage antiquing paste, and this is going to create more depth and age and just all kinds of loveliness. I'm going to buff it out real good, and you know the drill. I already did it with the first project. I don't want to run it into the ground and bore you. I didn't think the knob was a good fit, so I went through my stash looking at what I had on hand, and I didn't have anything. So I reattached the knob. I am going to order a different one or go to Hobby Lobby and see what I can find. Other than that, I love this. I really do. I think the buttery yellow and the crackle and the transfers and that beautiful fiber paper and that natural wood peeking through the grate, I just think it came together exactly the way I hoped. Didn't I say that fiber paper would look like it melted right into the project? It really does. And I love how you can see the chippiness and the crackle right through it. It's just so beautiful. Thank you if you're still here with me, because we're finally on our third project. I have another bread box, but this one is metal, and I also got this one on Whatnot. The moment I saw it though, I I knew it had a lot of potential. Sometimes you just get that feeling when you find a piece. You can already picture what it could possibly be, right? And so I took it outside, sprayed it with 3 coats of Rust-Oleum's 2-in-1 primer. And since we're working on a metal surface, I wanted to make sure that we had a solid foundation and plenty of adhesion before moving on to the rest, right? Now you already see I'm painting it the color Nimbus, which is a really soft gray. I let that dry and now I have my second coat. And while it's still wet, I have an inlay from IOD's summer 2026 release, and it's called Alfred Peets & Co. It's a fan favorite. So I already have my inlay cut to fit. I have it spritzed with water and I'm setting it right down into that wet paint. I also like to spritz my paint with a little bit of water too and position it where I want it. I'm going to use my fingers to gently tap, tap, tap before going in with a damp cloth and really work that inlay right into that medium or into the paint. I say medium because I do sometimes use liquid patina. You do have a little bit of working time. If the placement isn't quite right, you can carefully reposition it before it starts to set up. You really don't want to risk smearing your inlay. And I think one of the biggest things to make sure is that you have a good wet coat of paint underneath and really taking the time to press that inlay into the paint, as I mentioned. I'm going to add this design on the sides, wrapping it around the back, and I didn't have quite enough of this, so I'm applying this print to each side, and then I'm going to let it dry, and I'm going to reposition it onto the back. So this will get 2 uses. I won't be able to use it again after that. I feel like when you take your inlay off for the second time, whether you can get a third use out of them. Honestly, I haven't had a third use out of any of my inlays. But now that they're nice and dry, I'm spritzing them with more water, and this is where all the magic happens. After I spritz it, I dab back the excess water with the damp rag and then begin pulling back. And if there's any resistance, I'll spritz it again, dab the water back, and then begin pulling back on my inlay. This part never gets old, and I know you've probably heard us creators say it a gazillion times, but it truly is one of those magical moments, every time, I'm telling you. And I'll just let you know right now, if you're not a reveal lover like me, you're just gonna want to fast forward. Now we're taking those used inlays and applying them to the back. So repeating the same process, wet paint, mist your inlay, and then apply it. I'm going to have to cut pieces to patch up that small section. I really enjoy using chalk paint with my inlays. I've used them with sealers, as I mentioned earlier, and sometimes I do love the results, but if I had to choose, paint is still my favorite. And one thing to keep in mind is that if you reuse an inlay on a project, some of that color from the first project can still transfer onto the next one. If you're working with a favorite inlay or a specific color palette, that's just something to consider before you start. Now you can see with the used inlay, the colors aren't going to be as bold as they were the first time around. What you're left with is much softer, more subtle, and honestly, I love that look. It feels faded in the best way possible, almost like the design has naturally just aged over time. And the details are still there, just a little more muted, which gives it so much more character and charm. If you've watched more of my recent videos, you may remember this custom color I made using Waverly's Dusk and Waverly's Ivory and mixed it in with some salt wash, which is a texture additive. And I had it saved in the jar and it stays great. So I painted the whole lid with that. And I just did 2 coats. Then I just started stippling that mixture around the bread box. The more I played with it, the more I liked the look. I ended up using the color Mineral, more of Nimbus, and just a tad of the blue, and just started stippling the colors all along the whole piece, except for the top, including the inlays as well. At one point, I stamped on the word bread right on the front, but it wasn't quite straight. And honestly, it just felt too bold for the look I was after. So I wiped it back the best I could and went right back into layering. I brought more of Nimbus and Mineral and just kept building on those soft layers until it felt finished and aged. One thing I forgot to mention is I loved how when I was peeling back the inlays that I could still see the primer through the chalk paint. I just think that this piece has all kinds of depth and it ends up being my favorite piece. Even though I had a few bumps in the road, I'm glad I just kept plugging away and just kept going. For the top, I added Gilded Memories. It's a H2O transfer by Redesign. And this is where I have a little confession. I got distracted and completely forgot about it. Normally, I remove the backing fairly quickly, but this one sat in the water for like an hour. And when I peeled it back, it was a little wonky. So I just peeled it back and dabbed away some of the excess water. But I wasn't too worried about it. This is a vintage inspired piece, and not everything has to be perfect. This transfer that I added to the front is IOD's traditional pots. I love this swan and the beautiful typography on the bottom. I'm sealing it in with Pentart's decoupage varnish and glue. I love that it has a matte finish. And now I'm going to go back in with my stamps. Again, this is vintage script and handwritten notes. And using the same stone gray ink, I'm going all over the whole box, the top, the bottom, well, not the bottom, the sides, just placing them here and there and not necessarily re-inking my stamps. But you'll see here in a second, I'm going to take a damp rag and just kind of dab back some of the excess ink. That way it's just not too bold. Now I'm going to use my crackle pattern to create the illusion of tiny little cracks throughout the surface. This stamp has become one of my favorites. It comes with several different texture designs, including scratches and larger crackle patterns, but I find myself reaching for the smaller one over and over again. And this is IOD's texture stamp. And look, just look at how beautiful this bread box came out. I love the contrast. I love the texture. I love the soft layers and color. And the faded paint inlay is so beautiful. The Gilded Memories transfer, I think that paired perfectly with it. This piece somehow feels elegant and time-worn, collected and full of character all at the same time. Now I need your help. What would you store in this? I don't think I'm actually going to use it for bread, even though, it's currently sitting on my kitchen counter. I'd love to hear from you guys. Just let me know. I'm still trying to decide. And with that, we reached the end of today's video. If you're new here, I truly hope that you enjoyed spending some time with me today and found a little inspiration along the way. I'd love for you to subscribe so you know what to do. And for all of my friends returning, thank you so much for being here. Your comments, encouragement, and support mean more to me than you know. And remember, if you loved it, hype me up. Leave me a comment and turn on those notifications so you don't miss another video from me. Thank you for spending time with me today. Until the next one, bye.